Now, in just a few hours, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is set to land in New Delhi, where he will be kicking off a three-day visit to India. Trade and e-commerce disputes are expected to be high on the agenda after New Delhi imposed retaliatory tariffs on Washington for revoking its preferential trade privileges. The visit also comes just days before U.S. President Donald Trump and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi are due to meet at the G20 summit in Osaka. Now, for more, let's cross over to our correspondent Neha Punya in New Delhi. Neha, a lot to talk about at a time when U.S.-India ties, aren't exactly at their best. But what do you think is Mr. Pompeo's primary goal for this particular visit, though?
Over the next 2 days, India and the United States are going to have to navigate some very tricky territory, diplomatically speaking, because this visit by Secretary Pompeo is the first engagement that Prime Minister Modi's government is holding with the United States after last month's massive election victory. It's also coming, like you said, in the backdrop of new lows as far as the bilateral trade relationship is concerned. Mr. Trump has been repeatedly attacking Prime Minister Modi personally over India's high tariff regime, for allegedly not giving American companies enough market access, and all of these issues will be top of the agenda when you have the U.S. Secretary of State meeting India's Foreign Minister and the Prime Minister on Wednesday. And we're giving to understand that as far as these issues are concerned, India has retaliated, like you said, with those tariffs against 28 American products. But there's also a sense within quarters here in New Delhi that America has been consistently asking for a lot. So they also admit that with Mr. Modi, President Trump, beg your pardon, focused so heavily on his re-election bid, it's quite likely that the American regime is unlikely to meet them halfway, that they're going to stick to their positions entirely. So we will see a discussion, of course, but it's unclear at this point in time whether there's going to be any kind of resolution to the trade spat that's played out over the last 3 weeks. The kind of reassurance we're expecting from Mike Pompeo is not going to be on the trade front, but perhaps on the issue of the H-1B visa, something that goes by majority to Indian skilled workers wanting to work in the United States. There was a Reuters report a few days ago that spoke of America wanting to cap the number of H-1B visas issued to Indian workers. The U.S. State Department denied that and said that that's not going to play out directly as far as this trade spat is concerned. So there will be some reassurance, but I believe there will be a lot of grandstanding from both sides. A commitment, of course, to continue engaging on this issue, but I don't see a resolution to this crisis immediately.
Neha, just quickly, Mr. Pompeo's trip comes off the back of talks in the Middle East. How has India been reacting to the recent escalation in U.S.-Iran tensions?
There's a lot of concern here, I can tell you that for sure, primarily because of two counts. One, India has strategic, historic ties with Iran. It's building a port in Iran as well, which will give it greater access to the Middle East. If this conflict escalates, India's access to that port and all of that region essentially gets cut off. The other concern in India is that with it importing 84% of its oil needs primarily from that region, any kind of escalation in this conflict will lead to surge in global oil prices as well as disruptions in the supply of oil. So these are concerns India has. As far as the Trump regime is concerned, they've also been trying to build support for their taking on Iran. That's something they're not likely to get from India for the reasons I cited above as well. But India is likely to temper that by reminding.
Okay, we just lost Neha Punya there speaking to us from New Delhi. But for more insight on this, we're joined in studio by P.S. Suryanarayana. He's a visiting senior fellow at the Rajaratnam School of International Studies here in Singapore with expertise in Indian foreign policy. Mr. Surya, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Now, as we heard our correspondent Neha Punya talking about the relationship between India and the United States, what's your take on it, given sort of in the recent months the U.S. seems to be acting quite aggressively towards China, towards Iran, and now towards India as well?
Well, the relations between the U.S. and India are at a tipping point, as it were. You can describe that as a tipping point. So it's now a tough call for India to decide which way to go forward. The U.S. does expect India to go in for a pro-U.S. tilt, as it were. And U.S. expects India to be a junior partner, a junior strategic partner. India is already a strategic partner. U.S. expectation is India should be a junior strategic partner with reference to China, that is U.S. relations with China, with reference to Russia, with reference to Iran now, for instance, because Iran has become a major challenge for the U.S. right now. India, for its part, does not want to be a junior partner. India wants to be a more or less equal partner with the U.S. And that will not be easy for India, given the current situation. But then India is no longer as weak as it used to be in relation to either the US or even China for that matter. And therefore, it will be interesting to watch how the two sides can engage each other diplomatically and also strategically going forward. This particular visit should be some kind of a pointer towards the new direction that may be taking place,
Yeah, you mentioned there about a new direction taking place, perhaps engaging as well and being a strategic partner. We know that the two countries are almost close to an industrial security agreement that will allow the transfer of defense technology. So how significant is it for both the U.S. and India at this point?
Yeah, it has been very significant, and it will continue to be significant because India has already signed what is known as foundational agreement. In fact, a series of them, 3 foundational agreements with the U.S. in defense cooperation with the U.S. Well, defense cooperation is essentially not one-way traffic because the U.S., of course, is technologically far advanced than India in defense matters. But India's capabilities, military capabilities, are also quite important for the U.S. The U.S. is expecting what is known in defense terminology as interoperability in defense and strategic matters with the Indian side, especially in relation to the Indo-Pacific region, And therefore, this particular agreement, which will be the 4th foundational agreement, as and when it is signed, will really seal in a sense, the defense cooperation agreement between U.S. and India at a very high level. So it is very significant for India, and it is equally significant for the U.S. because the U.S. does want a real partner in terms of military capabilities in the Indo-Pacific region, apart from Japan in the east.
Well, U.S. President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi are due to meet in Osaka for the G20 summit this weekend. Narendra Modi just coming off the high of sort of winning election for the 2nd term in office. How do you see this the relationship between the two playing out?
Well, as I said, the relationship is at a tipping point, not just between the countries, but also between the leaders. Because U.S. President Donald Trump is known for surprising the world leaders. And Narendra Modi, of course, is now further strengthened by the new mandate he has got. But then he knows that he is dealing with an American leader who is also equally very firm in his stand on a variety of issues, including towards India, as recently evident on trade matters. Therefore, the meeting between these two leaders in Osaka, if they do meet bilaterally on the sidelines, should be very significant because it will be something like testing each other's political will, And therefore, apart from that, the discussions at that level, one would expect, would be much more strategic in nature. Like, for instance, the trilateral arrangement which India has with Japan and the U.S., in fact, the 3 leaders, Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister Modi, and President Trump met on the sidelines of G20 at Buenos Aires last year. That was the first ever summit between the 3 countries, trilaterally, in the Indo-Pacific context. And recently, the Japanese defense minister who was here for the Shangri-La dialogue, when I asked him what does it signify, he said that one can take it as a code group for the Indo-Pacific, the US, India, Japan, trilateral. So these 3 leaders, if they meet on the sidelines of G20 again, that will also be a significant development, apart from the bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. And also there is the idea of Quad, as you know, including Australia in the Indo-Pacific region. Last time, the Australian Prime Minister was not part of that dialogue on the sidelines of G20 at Buenos Aires. This time, one doesn't know, really.
Yes, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah,
Thank
yes,
you so
indeed.
much. And the tipping point you spoke of, we'll be watching closely to see how that plays out between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Donald Trump. Thank you very much. P.S. Suryanarayana, visiting senior fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies.
Thank you, sir.